I'm pursuing a relationship with Jesus. I'm really getting to know him and understanding scripture and seeing my life really grow in that area. But once I graduate here, I have to go work and I have to go do something else. Like, my time isn't 100% now spent in ministry and godly community. So that's when the tension for me actually started to really build.
What's really cool about the filmmaking, like, art sphere is that there isn't this sacred secular divide within the creative community. That actually, like, most artists, whether they're Christian or non-Christian or they're practicing another religion, like atheist or whatever, they still see this, like, divine spiritual component to the creative process.
Life's really simple when it comes down to it. We're just called to love God and love others.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, but it's not complex, right? And so whatever we do it unto the glory of God.
Marketplace skills are missionary skills.
So we just finished our Christian business breakfast, our first quarter Christian business breakfast on the sacred secular divide. And we just got three friends here. We're just going to kind of, unpack it a little bit through your lens and through the lens of your own life. So first and foremost, I want each of you to tell us, what is your name and what do you do every day in the marketplace? And we'll start right here.
Cool. Well, my name is Trent. I'm a public accountant, a CPA at one of the big four accounting firms. My actual title is I'm an auditor. So we're talking about spreadsheets a lot today. That is my bread and butter.
There you go. And we just talked, you just ended busy season.
Just ended.
Like last week was it. So You're finally able to breathe a little bit again.
Just a little bit more.
God bless you. We do believe that Jesus can redeem and resurrect auditing. So yeah.
He can.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, my name's Josh Chitwood. I'm a filmmaker. Me and my wife, we own Chitwood Media, which is a freelance videography company that we've been running since 2014 now. And our heart is just to show people the beauty of God and the beauty of people. So
that's awesome. So we got you on the other side of the camera today.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
usually the one shooting these videos.
Yeah. I'm in the hot seat.
So, all right. Yeah, it's great to have you. So.
My name's Steve Allison. I'm a business owner, entrepreneur, but also the business pastor at my church.
That's awesome. Yeah. And Steve, you and I have known each other for a long time. Yeah, going back a lot of years. Absolutely. So I've watched your journey unfold, and I know you're going to have a lot of good things to share today. So today at the CBB, first quarter, we always talk about this issue of the sacred secular divide. And so I want to get your perspectives on this. You guys just spent an hour hearing what the Stone Table thinks about this. So let's just have a conversation. It doesn't have to necessarily be in order, but in your own words, how do you define the sacred secular divide?
I mean, so rather than defining it, I feel like just the sacred secular divide, I see it as fuel for the culture wars. So what I mean by that is that we almost limit where we see God's fingerprints. Like, we only see him moving in, like, explicitly Christian church, kingdom spaces. Whereas I think in reality, like, the Great Commission cannot be fulfilled unless if it is truly in all spaces of life.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say is, like, it creates this, like, culture war mentality of, like, these are the things that are truly kingdom-minded, whereas these things are actually not kingdom-minded.
That's really interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great perspective. I mean, Steve, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, years ago we had the separation of church and state in our country. Yeah. And I think that kind of turned into the separation of life outside of the church versus life inside of the church.
Yeah.
And so I think that naturally created a divide in our country between those two.
That's really interesting perspective as well. I've never run it through that lens, but yeah, there's just this assumption, right, that certain spheres of life are secular and certain spheres of life are sacred. Trent, I mean, how do you see this?
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Simply enough, God is with us in some areas that feel spiritual, and that's where God should be. In other areas of our life, God's not quite there. He's moving in all sorts of things, but he's not quite present with us. That idea he's not present with us, or he's not capable in those spaces.
Yeah. So let's talk about your everyday work then. Mm-hmm. Like where have you felt like, man, my work really matters to God, or have you been able to connect those dots, or do you struggle to connect those dots? So.
Yeah, I think for me, something I've got to experience recently is when I invite a coworker, someone I get to see day to day, into a joyful experience with Christian community. That's really been standing out to me. I have a bunch of young guys that I work with. Everyone likes playing sports. Everyone likes hanging out. And so through our church, we play basketball every other week. And to me, those moments when guys from work show up, they play basketball, they get to be loved on by guys that they don't know yet, but they get just another touch point from God and God's presence. That's really how it's been standing out to me.
Yeah, so it really is a platform that puts you in connection with people who need access to Jesus, right?
Certainly.
So, I always like to joke because my early career was similar to yours. Mm-hmm. You got your CPA. I wussed out way before I got to that point. But, I used to joke with people that, Jesus can't redeem accounting. He can redeem every other profession, but not accounting. Mm-hmm. That I've been a recovering accountant for 25 years. It's not really true. There is beauty in accounting. So do you ever feel, even in the work itself, do you feel a connection with your faith? Or do you struggle with that?
I think I struggle with it.
Yeah.
When you're working on something, you spent so many hours on it, and you start to feel frustrated, and you're not feeling this really has any relational tie to anyone else. Yeah. It's like, I need to get this task done, and I have a deadline. That's when it starts to slip pretty quickly. And I forget that this task has a purpose, not only to the marketplace itself, but how me completing this task with excellence and for my boss and communicating things well, that actually does have a relational impact. Yeah. But it's easy to see it slip pretty quickly.
You got a big client that you work for, right? Mm-hmm. Like, can you don't have to tell us who the client is, but what industry is it?
They're a real estate company. Yeah. They're a public company. They own properties across the U.S.
Yeah.
A large company.
Yeah, so sometimes I think we can get so distant from the impact of that work itself, right? That we forget, and we get so, bogged down in the minutia and the detail. We forget that. I mean, is it commercial? Is it residential? What kind of real estate is it?
They're commercial.
Yeah, so they're commercial, right? And so, and then I think we can buy into some of these, caricatures and stereotypes that we see in our culture today. That the big companies are they're just squashing the little guy, right? And so it's really hard for us to realize maybe the small businesses that are being housed within these commercial real estate properties that are employing people and adding value to people's lives, right? And you are an extension and a connection to that.
Yeah.
But when you're just bogged down in trying to get the debits and credits to balance, right? Like you can feel distant from the human value add side, So that's great. That's great. And I do really believe that Jesus redeems the accounting profession. I do.
Thank you.
It's a good joke, right? It's just a good joke.
It works well.
And sometimes you need a good joke. So Steve, you've been connected to real estate, your business, but I mean, when have you really felt, I mean, we understand now you're acting as the business director for your church as well, the business pastor for your church, but you spent a lot of years as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. When
did you feel most like connected to your faith through your job? Because I know it was always important to you.
Yeah. Ashamed to say that usually happens when there's problems. It's like it's God's reminder that, hey, maybe you do need me a little bit, But, years ago, we walked through an exercise with our employees. We had about 9 employees at the time, and kind of walked through the principle of the butterfly effect and really sat down and talked through what impact they're really having in their day-to-day, because you get bogged down in the minutia of customer service calls and deadlines and frustrations and people yelling at you and all that kind of stuff, and you forget how much impact you really have. And so at the time we were doing closings, anywhere from 600 to 800 closings a month nationwide for title companies, and we were coordinating all of that. And so my team was in charge of scheduling it, making sure it was on time, getting documents to who they needed to go to, being the go-between from our client to our contractors that would perform the task for us. And we sat through and we really walked through all the different lives that we were touching, whether it was the home buyer or the borrower, and the impact that it has on their lives are changing in that moment, becoming first-time home buyers, for instance, to the loan officer that helped with that loan, the realtors that helped get that house acquired, the title company all involved, and every transaction touched no less than 10 families.
Wow.
And having that understanding that there's way more impact. You only see the little ripple you make in the lake, right? But you never see all that really happens that goes out from that.
Yeah, and you are a lot of times dealing with problems and stress and friction, and so it really is hard to forget. There's this old quote from Martin Luther, father of the Protestant Revolution, says that God is milking the cows through the vocation of the milkmaid. I always love that quote. And people are, sometimes they have a hard time connecting because we don't have milkmaids today, right? But at least I don't. We pick up our milk at the store, but I think understanding that God was housing people through the work that you guys were doing, right? That God was doing that,
right?
But He was doing that through His image bearers and through you and through your team, right? And so, I think we have a lot easier time connecting the dots with, that our work gives us access to people who need Jesus, which is true. I mean, that is absolutely true. And it is one of the most important things for us to remember as marketplace people, or that our work provides money for us to give to, people who are in need. And that is something we need to understand about it as well. But even the work itself, is sacred and holy, before the Lord. So Josh, talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of just softballs to what I was thinking about is like being an image bearer. With my work as a filmmaker, and I identify more as an artist than a business person or a salesperson. Like, I'm definitely more a creative at heart. And so, the very first thing that we learn about God is that He was creative. And so being image bearers and being created in His image, like, we were created to create. And so I think just like, by default, my type of work it's not hard for me to see the spiritual side of it, because I just see it as I'm creating alongside God. I'm creating in a way that He's designed me to and designed all of us to. Whether it's, because people think like, oh, I'm not an artist because I can't paint. It's like, well, what about creative thinking and organizing? There's so many different ways that God has given us creative ways of envisioning the world and creating things. And so, like, the original question of like, when did you feel like your work mattered to God? Like, it's never been a question in my head of like, is it important? Because the process of creating things and seeing Him in that process and seeing His fingerprints within that, and then seeing the response of someone, to me has been so rewarding, because it can create laughter, it can create tears, like it can create bring people back to a sentimental time like in their life or whatever from whatever you made. I think what's really cool about the filmmaking like art sphere is that there isn't this sacred secular divide within the creative community. That actually, like, most artists, whether they're Christian or non-Christian or they're practicing another religion, like atheist or whatever, they still see this like divine spiritual component to the creative process. And so I see this like openness to even just me sharing my faith and why I create. And talking about the image of God, talking about being an image bearer, I see a lot of just openness to that within the community, and so that's what's cool about that sphere of work, is that I just feel like people are hungry and they've actually experienced the divine, and they're open to knowing truth.
Is that common grace? I mean, even if they're not aware of God, God's stamp is still on them. Right?
Yes.
And so there is some kind of a connection there. I love that idea of the Imago Dei, that we were created. I love to say we were created to create with God's creation. Right.
Yes.
And so it's like all of these raw materials and pieces, like he gave them to us intentionally to be creative. And Josh's line of work, it's a little easier to see, but it's in ours as well. Although creative accounting does get that's where the auditors come in and catch some things.
That's my job.
That's where you come in and catch some things. But there's still a creative aspect to everything we do, and there is an aspect of purpose and usefulness and adding value to people's lives that was what we were created for, right? And so I think that's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit generationally. Steve, you and I are the old guys in the room. We got a couple younger guys here as well, but generationally, I don't know if, so I'll just speak for myself. I never heard anyone talk about theology of the marketplace till I was almost 40 years old. Did you guys grow up hearing this message? Is it a generational thing? Is it just maybe, I don't know, your pastor's insight on this, or how you grew up? Let's talk to some of the younger guys first. I mean, Trent, did you grow up hearing about this, or?
I never heard any of that growing up. And I grew up in church too, a big church in Fort Wayne. Really great teaching there. A lot of people who really poured into me. But I never heard anything about it. So I went to college, obviously in business school, surrounded by business-minded students and business student believers as well through the ministry I was a part of. And no one was talking about the idea of calling was present. And it was always from a lens of, okay, what internship and what accounting job am I getting through the business school? It wasn't, maybe does God have something else for my life, or once I get that job, what does that look like? So it never came up. And so as I got closer to my graduation date, I was processing, what does my career actually look like? That's when I felt a tension come up in my life of, okay, I'm pursuing a relationship with Jesus. I'm really getting to know him and understanding scripture and seeing my life really grow in that area. But once I graduate here, I have to go work and I have to go do something else. Like, my time isn't 100% now spent in ministry and godly community. And so that's when the tension for me actually started to really build. And I had to think, okay, what does God do in this space? Is it, I just, go to class, I go to work, and I don't consider God at all at the time.
Yeah.
And so that tension actually became very tangible for me as I got close to the end of graduation. And then that's when we met, actually.
Yeah.
And I think that whole shift in my mindset then of, what does God have in store for the marketplace? Where is God actually moving? Because he is moving in the marketplace. That really started to explode.
It's interesting with college ministries like you were a part of. They're amazing, and a lot of people either find faith there or really deepen their faith there, and it's 3 or 4 years of intense discipleship and community. I mean, you're living together a lot of times, right? Like, I mean, and it's the focus of your life even as you're studying, and then you launch out into the world, and sometimes it can be like, okay, well, that was awesome. Now what is this, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the more we can do to help connect those dots, the better. So Josh, I mean, generationally, I mean, you grew up
you're a pastor's kid.
You're a pastor's kid.
Yeah, my dad was a youth pastor. My whole upbringing. Now he's a pulpit pastor. But similar to you, like, I never heard like a sermon explicitly for like people going into vocational, or not vocational, going into the marketplace and going into just everyday work. But growing up, we would go to this Christian conference, and one of the big things that they talked about was kingdom workers. And so they would show these really beautiful documentaries, like talking about different people that were expanding God's kingdom and doing what was close to vocational ministry, but maybe like if they're in a different country, it was kind of more in like with a business mindset or something like that. But it still was like they're preaching, they're teaching, they're doing Bible studies. And there was always this call, like, do you feel called to be a kingdom worker? And for me, it was like, in terms of the people in the videos, like, I didn't feel called to doing necessarily what they were doing, because a lot of them, it was like they're preaching or teaching or doing Bible studies, that type of thing. But when I saw these documentary style films, I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, and I want to do that for God's kingdom. And so they would have this, like, at the end of the week at the conference, they would have this call for anyone that's wanting to be a kingdom worker. And I don't feel like I could step up to raise my hand and go up, because it was very clear that a kingdom worker are the people that are, preaching and teaching and doing Bible study. And it wasn't until college that I actually heard a sermon explicitly about directed to people going into the marketplace, and that were seeing that as God's mission, being a kingdom worker and expanding God's kingdom. And ironically, whenever I heard the sermon, it was at the same time that I had unintentionally started our business. Like we just started, it was just like, hey, you do videos? Like, can you do this video? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And it just kind of stumbled into this thing that became Chit with Media. And I had just printed all of our business cards. And I heard this sermon, and I just I don't even think there might've been an altar call. I don't even remember, but there was worship at the end. And I just went to the very front of the altar call and just put my business cards like on the front of the altar, and was just like praying and crying, and like literally was there until like I got up and like everyone was gone. Wow. And it was just like, it was one of those moments for me that was just like, God, like I know that this is where you're positioning me and putting me into, and it is truly yours. Like it's not to build wealth, it's not to expand my kingdom, but like I really want to expand your kingdom. And so that sermon was very impactful for me, because it was the first time I felt like a pastor was affirming the call that I felt on my life.
That's amazing.
So,
wow. That's powerful. And you know, I mean, I'll throw myself under the bus. I mean, I was in full-time ministry for 12 years. I never even digested that, right? I mean, to me, I wasn't in the marketplace anymore. Now I was doing sacred, special work.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden in 2012, I found myself, after 12 years of preaching and teaching and leading worship and all of those things, now I was renting apartments. So I was almost 40 years old, having to wrestle with this in my own life and realizing no one, including me, ever talked to me, and I never talked to anyone else. So how does renting apartments have anything to do with God's work in the world, right? So, you know, I think there's a lot of people out there wrestling with it. I don't know, Steve, you and I grew up very similarly.
We did.
We're about the same age.
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever hear about this? Did you talk about this?
No, not at all. You know, I've heard you tell stories before, and I've had the same experience. You go to church camp.
Yeah.
And at church camp, you know, there's always a very specific night that there's a call for those that have been called to ministry to come forward and be prayed over. And there's something powerful in that.
Absolutely.
Like I don't poo-poo that in any way,
No.
Right? But when you're not one of those kids, you kind of feel lesser than.
Yeah.
In the moment, you know, you're like, what about me? You know.
I think that's unintentional. No one means to do that to us, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And so for me, it was, you know, I don't think anybody ever said these words, but it's just kind of like what I assumed from my surroundings, that it's either you did the ministry or you funded the ministry.
Yes.
Yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, I went to Evangel, and I started to learn there from President Spence that he always talked about the integration of faith and learning. I never really took that beyond learning and translated this really the integration of faith and marketplace.
Yeah.
You know, and so very unique situation that, you know, I got a biblical studies degree and a business management degree at the time, and spent a little time as a youth pastor, and then God just very clearly called me into the business world, and that's where I've spent the last 30 years or so.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting being your friend and watching your progress from a distance a little bit, you know, as, you know, you being my pastor for a season of our lives, and watching you wrestle with knowing that you're called to something higher than business, for lack of a better word, than making a dollar.
Yeah.
Right. And wrestling between full-time ministry and then how that stone table was just birthed out of that tension in your own life, I think, you know.
That's really good. You know, I think, and I will say, for the season I was your pastor, I'm sorry I didn't preach on this.
It's all right.
I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. So we want to interrupt this conversation for just a quick second, because if you're new to the Stone Table, we have something we want to give you. If you'll go to thestonetable.org/start, we've got a free 5-day devotional just to help you practically think about how to connect your faith to your everyday work. And that'll give you tons of access to all kinds of free resources that we have just to encourage you as a believer in the marketplace, in the business world, that who you are and what you do matters to God. All right, let's get back to the conversation. There is something unique about we call it the ecclesiastical call to pastoral ministry, right? And we want to honor that. I mean, Scripture talks about double honor, right? And so I think I think what we talk about here a lot is our intent is not to bring down the sacredness of pastoral ministry. Some of my best friends in the world are pastors.
Yes.
And so we need to honor that. We need to lift that up. Or people who will move cross-culturally as missionaries and take their families to some of the hardest places in the world. That is a unique and special assignment. Yeah. So I think what we're trying to do is raise the water level, though, because you said it. We just assumed, well, all you do is fund the ministry. Like you just go drag some of those secular heathen assets back and give them to the people who are doing the real sacred ministry, right? Mm-hmm. And you said the word assumed. And no one ever said that to me. Mm-hmm. I assumed it. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so some of my bad work theology, I think is what I call an assumed theology. Yes. Mm-hmm. It wasn't overtly taught to me. And a lot of my pastor friends, they'll say, I still remember one of my dearest friends. He did a sermon series on this, and I was one of 3 weeks. And when I came in and I opened that first week, when he introduced me, he got him in front of his congregation. He said, I need to apologize to you because I've been your pastor for over 2 decades, and it never even occurred to me to talk about where you spend half of your waking hours. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a disconnect, and it's not to point fingers at anyone. I think we've all bought into this Gnostic, sacred, secular divide kind of idea, and it just, we assume. We just have made a lot of assumptions, right? So our hope in breaking down this divide is that if everyone can see the people God puts them in contact with at work, the money that God gives us to put into his kingdom through work, but also the work itself as part of God, of forming, filling, subduing, of honoring God and loving our neighbor, all of those things, that maybe we can move this Great Commission calling forward in the world. Yeah. So for us, that's what this is all about. But Steve, that was so good. I mean, it was so good. So let's talk a little bit. Let's talk micro here. Let's zoom in a little bit. So when work is going well, or when work is going poorly, what does it do to your faith? I'll throw some things out. So we've had some stress in the housing side of our business, some programs that we've relied on and depended on that have not come through, and they've created financial stress. I don't always like what comes out of me in those moments, and I'm like, I'm the guy up preaching about this, and I'll hang up the phone with our attorney or our CPAs or something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just disconnected my faith from this moment that God gave me to be a representative of him in the marketplace, right? Do you guys ever wrestle with that? Or when work is going really, really well, what does it do to your faith? I don't know. Josh.
Sure. I mean, I guess I'll do the whenever it's going poorly, or like whenever there's difficulty. I've learned that it creates a deeper dependence on God, I guess, like in those moments. Because I see my flesh or my natural instinct come out. So like this past year, so we used to shoot a lot of weddings. We've kind of scaled back a little bit in weddings. As a documentary filmmaker, it's kind of fun because I feel like it's documentary boot camp because it's a real situation, or it's a situation that you have no control over. And so you can't tell them like, hey, can you walk down the aisle again? Or can you do the kiss again? Like you have to get these moments when they're happening. So it's good because it helps us then whenever we're in documentary.
I find
world.
Brides and their moms are really like...
they're just so chill.
They're so
easy
chill.
to work with. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what's cool is like within our work, we've gotten not as many bridezillas as some of my filmmaker friends. And I think that's partially because we don't like go to the galas. We don't like we don't sell our work. It's like if someone resonates with our work, then they'll work with us, and our work, I feel like, just reflects who we are as this more down-to-earth, like easygoing, story-driven. But so most wedding films, we have like, we send it over, and there's like 1 to 3 comments of like, hey, can you switch out these people? We don't really know them, or like, can you switch out this thought? Last year, to start off our year, the first 2 weddings we did, literally both brides had like 20 changes. And my initial instinct and reaction was not good, because it's just like, what? Like, because it's like you see someone like, okay, I understand what they're saying. And there's other ones just like, what are you talking about? And so I did, in that process, I was just like, God, give me like grace to show them, and also to like listen and to hear them out. But then also to like see if there's any room for just me advocating for like, hey, I think this shot should stay in there. I think you know, it's important to the story or important to the day. But I've definitely seen that where, because I have in filmmaking, it's like I have control over like a certain amount of it whenever it's a client-based project. But like whenever there's like changes that they're wanting that like I don't agree with, that's where I have to just depend on God to like show grace and to truly listen and to put the interests of others above my own, because that's a very hard thing to do as a human. So in the editing process, putting the client's interests above my own is definitely a thing that I've seen is hard for me.
So maybe your desire as an artist, the way you'd want to approach it as an artist, is different than the way the client would want it as.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. Anybody else? I mean, Steve, what do you think?
For me, usually it's when things are going bad is when I'm more aware of my faith, my need, my dependence on God. You know, for whatever reason, I have this tendency to rely on God until I get to a certain point, and then I'm like, okay, I got it from here. I'm good. And like I forget that what got you here was reliance on God.
Isn't that true?
And it's hard to remember, you know, especially as an entrepreneur. I mean, it's just, you know, things are going good, and your ego, you start making some money, your ego kind of gets puffed a little bit, you know, and it's like, hey, I kind of know what I'm doing here, and things get rolling, and then I think God uses circumstances to reel us back in and remind us that we do need to rely on Him.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, you said the dependence thing as well, but you know, I always tell people anything that makes us more dependent on Jesus is our friend. Even if it stinks to high heaven as we're going through it, right? Absolutely. And when we are dependent and we are leaning into Jesus, when we are abiding in Jesus, I think that's when we're actually fully human in those moments.
Yes.
When we're trying to do it on our own, we actually become less than what we were created to be. You know, so it's really interesting. I feel that too. And you know, it's like, well, Jesus, I just want you to take away everything that makes me feel dependent on you, right? Like all the circumstances that make me feel dependent on you, please, would you remove those from my life? And and I think sometimes the Lord reminds me that like I love you too much to do that because it's not how you were designed. So Trent, talk to us.
Yeah, no, I feel very similarly. I've realized in the hardship and the difficulty, my level of asking goes up quite a bit. God, I have this problem. I'm stressed. I need help in this. God, would you come alongside me? But I've also found that in that time, my abiding goes down. Just sitting humbly before the Lord and being in His presence and taking a slow moment with Him, those moments shrink quite a bit. And then I totally agree. As things are going well, I forget easily those moments where God was present and He did help and He answered my prayers and calls. So it's another reminder of when things are going well, God likes to give me a little humility check and say, you know, look what I've done in your life so far. Look how present I have been and how I've moved. And those moments draw me then back to abiding once again in the good times, and inviting God in to the celebration of feeling light and rested and present. And it's a difficult but a joyful circle of difficulties and overcoming and letting God partner in both seasons of that.
Gosh, I love that. All right, let's I don't know, let's open up to think of a time that you handled your faith at work well. I mean, is there something that sticks out to you? You were like, yeah, I think I embodied that lack of a sacred secular divide, right? I mean, I don't know. It feels weird to say, like, when was a moment you were prideful about the way you handled your faith at work? Right? It's like the opposite, right? So talk to me about a time like that you felt like, man, I really embodied this well, Trent.
Yeah, I have a client contact that I regularly deal with very often that tests me every interaction. Every interaction feels like I don't know where this is going to go. I might walk away, just getting backlash. It's nothing productive happened here, but I do depend on his work to get my work done. And so there was a moment over the last few months where I went and talked to him. I needed something pretty urgently, of course. And the conversation did not go well at all. It did not go well. Later that day, I just felt like kind of the Holy Spirit's nudge to go back and just talk to him, just check in on things, see how things are going. And it wasn't an overt moment of, this is my faith in Jesus. It was a moment of, thank you for dealing with all these questions I have. Thank you for working with us and being patient and helping out. And actually just acknowledging more of the work he did rather than just going to him and asking him for stuff all the time. And to me, that felt like, although a difficult situation, it humbled me to a position to say, he's still doing his job. He has priorities, and just making sure that he actually feels seen and thought of and loved, even though we're both a little frustrated in the situation. So that stood out to me in a big way when that happened.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the things that pops into my mind is a moment that I just blew it with a guy. I mean, I just blew it.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to even think about it today. But it's the moments we can step back into those times and make them right.
Yeah.
Sometimes that almost brings more of the kingdom.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how can, and I think it's just the Lord can redeem anything, right? And sometimes he redeems my stupidity.
Yeah.
Thank God for Jesus. So, Steve, is there a story that pops out to you?
Yeah, for me, it's usually relational. It's when I have the time to set the task aside and engage in conversation. I think that when your work ethic is strong and your integrity is strong, you earn the right to kind of speak into the people. You attract people that need counsel or help or just a listening ear, And so there have been several times where I've been sitting in a title company working, doing closings for them for the day. And, I'm in and out just doing the closings, minding my own business. And, I used to work in the title world, so I know how that goes as far as how hectic it is. And typically title company employees are the low man on the totem pole. So they get yelled at about everything, whether it's their fault or not, and so I can identify with that. I relate with that. And so I empathize with that with them. And so I've had several opportunities where people know, because I don't engage in the language that they engage in. I don't engage.
What do you mean, Steve?
Right. Yeah. in the water cooler talk that they engage in. They see me walking my faith out, and then it's lended itself opportunity to people coming to me and confiding things about their marriages or their health or whatever that they need a listening ear, they need prayer for or whatever. And so those have been opportunities that I think that God has been able to use me in a way that wasn't on my radar. Yeah. It's not in the mission statement of the business. It's not on the task list for today's things that need to be done. It's just opportunity presents itself and you're able to minister to somebody.
Man, I love that. And that is, we've talked about that multiple times now, that the opportunities we have to be the temple of the Holy Spirit, the overlap of heaven and earth, like the opportunities we have, because now that is in us to be that in other people's lives. That's real, and I have that so much more now than I did even when I was working in full-time ministry. Right. So that's beautiful. Yeah. So Josh, talk to us.
Yeah. So, 75% of my work is me hidden away editing, and so it's like that's like where I see the relationship between like me and God, But then like the other quarter is like the human interaction of like loving my neighbor, and so like we do a lot of interviews, and so within those, some of them are more just straightforward, but some of them we go into like just deeper places and really want to help the person feel like comfortable to be able to share and get to the heart of whatever we're talking about. And so there's just been I've recognized the more, because used to growing up, or not coming up, used to when we first started our company, like I feel like we would do interviews and I'm just so stressed out about like the technicality of everything and just making sure the camera's running, audio's good and whatnot. And now that I've gotten to a place where I feel more just like I've got that under control, I'm able to actually be present with the person. And so from that, I've learned that like truly listening and truly like allowing the conversation to go deeper has then allowed these off-camera moments, like after we're done with the interview, to go deeper with the person. And so like there was a situation like a few months ago where we were interviewing this young man who's currently homeless, and my wife, he had talked about his brother, and there was a really difficult situation that was going on like in his life with his brother. And so afterwards, we just asked him like, hey, like, how's your brother doing? And he just like broke down and was just like crying because his brother's now in prison, and he's part of the reason why he's in prison.
Wow.
And so we're just like, hey, can we like pray for you? Because he's very open to God and is on his own like journey of just starting to read his Bible and stuff like that. And so like my wife and I just ended up just like praying for him. He was just like shaking and crying. And so there's moments like that where it's like we're explicitly, like praying for someone, but there's other moments where we're just like we're finding commonality, or just like, hey, like I really related with that. Like, and it's someone that like we don't have much in common with, but we're finding these things where we relate to them. And we're open books, like we share our faith. And so people know where we like stand, like just in conversation or why we do things or whatever. So we don't hide that away, but it doesn't always have to be the forefront of the conversation when we're finding commonality just with other people. So,
yeah. Man, so good. Yeah, I love it. All right, let's stay there with you. Just a handful of more questions here. But if you were going to talk to somebody today that says my job doesn't matter to God, what would you say? What would you say to them?
I would tell them, be curious and look for God's fingerprints wherever you are, because that's where I feel like in the past there was certain aspects of the filmmaking process, or even just like owning a business, because like I said, like I'm more of an artist than a business salesman. So there's parts of the business that I didn't see as like sacred, and so, or even just the filmmaking process. And the more that I've trained myself to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit and seeing where God's fingerprints already are, or where He's moving, that's where I've found purpose in my work. So that's what I would say to someone that doesn't find purpose in their work is look for God's fingerprints.
So encouraging, man. Trent, how about you?
Yeah, we've talked a little bit of temple language and Holy Spirit, and what I would tell someone is that they are the mobile unit of God's presence.
Oh, man.
I love that phrase. Before I started working, someone told me that. You're the mobile unit of God's presence. Yeah. So what I would just expand on that is, when you step into the office, when you go to the site, wherever you go, God's presence is with you. And if God's presence is there, He cares about it. And He's with you specifically too. So as you go throughout the office, you grab coffee, you talk to someone, you sit down into your task, you have a meeting, God's presence is there with you. And to me, that's always stood out. Even though I may not always see God's presence or necessarily have that direct revelation, God's still present with me, and He's able to work through those times.
Yeah, that's so good. How did you say that? The mobile unit of God's presence. I heard somebody say one time that, what happened when Jesus died and was resurrected, it was like it moved us from a wall phone to a cell phone, right? It was like, it used to be that the temple's presence was stuck to the wall, right? And Steve and I are probably the only ones old enough to remember that. But, there was a day when I'd call Mandy from school and I'd have to go out in the hallway, and we had this long cord, right? But we were like stuck to the wall. But like what has happened is that the presence, the resurrection of Jesus and the bringing of the Spirit, right? Now the temple resides in us. That's why I love that analogy. It is so good. We're like the mobile phones. We're the mobile units of God's presence. The temple goes with us wherever we go. Man, that is beautiful. I hope that encourages somebody today. Steve, how about you? What would you say to somebody struggling?
I think I'd say you're right. God doesn't care about your job. He cares about you. He cares about everybody that you come in contact with, regardless of what it is you're doing. And, life's really simple when it comes down to it. We're just called to love God and love others. Yeah. And that's not easy, but it's not complex. right? And so whatever we do it unto the glory of God. And I think, especially in America, I think we feel this pressure to find our calling. You know, what is it, the thing that God has called us to do? Well, he's called us to love him and love others.
Yeah,
that's the calling,
it
right?
is.
Yeah.
And I think that life gives you different paths to choose along the way. You know, you end up having a teacher that inspires you in high school, that steers your vocational interest. And then you go to a college and meet somebody that is in a different, you switch majors, you know, it's like, it's not this predestined, you were put on this planet to put widgets together, right? It's like, we're put on this planet to love God and love others.
Yeah.
And whatever it is that we do that.
Yeah.
And God's going to bless that.
Such a good reminder. It is such a good reminder. You know, I mean, we talk a lot here about the difference between calling and assignment. And I think, and going back to you were talking about church camp. I think that is I think it's an important thing that we talk to people who are feeling like God maybe is leading them into full-time vocational ministry. But sometimes we feel like the terminology we use, calling, is it ends up creating separation that it was never intended to create. And so if we understand that all of us really as believers have the same calling.
Right.
Yes.
Everyone has the same calling. You are called. If you are in Christ, you are called. And then to realize, you know, the one revelation I love is that the word vocation that we use for, hey, what do you do for a living? You're an accountant, you're a filmmaker, right? You're in the mortgage business. Well, that's your vocation. Well, the root of that word is vocare, which means calling.
Yeah.
It means calling. So if we really understand, whether we're making widgets or preaching sermons, that we're all called to the glory of Jesus and to the love of our neighbor.
Yeah.
We all have different assignments. We all have different assignments within that calling, but you are called. You are called. You are called. All right. We're going to wrap up with this. Lightning round. Okay. This is fast and fun.
All right.
Okay. So fast and fun. One word for how you feel about your work right now, Steve.
Stewardship.
Stewardship. All right.
Great word.
Inshallah, which means God willing.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Arabic for
Arabic.
God willing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Love it.
Finished.
This is a CPA who just finished busy season right there.
Yeah.
I remember the 2 busy seasons I did that I survived. Yeah, I remember that feeling. All right. What's one thing you are currently learning the hard way, Trent?
Patience. I'm leading a team right now, and I have quite a few people under me. Patience is the hard way.
All right.
I think time is not always money. I'm been stepping into, so being a filmmaker and being in the marketplace, like I've always been on the outside of the church and filming things happening in the church. And now I'm like volunteering in the church a lot more. And so, and not getting paid for it. And I'm happy. Like I feel like more like a tent maker in that sense. But I'm learning that like time is not money, that I don't need to get paid for everything, all the work that God's called me to do.
Wow, that's awesome. Steve, one thing you're currently learning the hard way.
Yeah, it goes back to stewardship again. You know, being the business pastor at the church, it's just forced me to focus on that more, right? And now I'm learning that stewardship is not just financial.
Yeah.
It's God has entrusted you with time. He's entrusted you with abilities, entrusted you with family, and all those things we need to be stewarding well.
Yeah. Awesome. One thing you're grateful for in this season.
It's funny. I'm grateful for a comfortable bed where I can get good sleep.
That's legit, man. I actually heard a theologian talk about the spiritual discipline of sleep. And in our Western culture, where I think we feel like there's a self-righteousness to like, well, I was up early. I did, I'm grinding, all of that, right? There's a discipline to that. I actually like that a lot.
Yeah.
So in this season is deepening roots. This is the first time in my life where I'm not looking elsewhere or feel like I want to move somewhere else or like whatever. Like I just feel like right now I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm planted where I'm supposed to be, and that I'm just growing roots, my wife and I. And that is very freeing to not feel like there's grass greener on the other side. You're just staying. And whenever the grass dies, you're just trusting that God's going to water. So
I love that. Steve, what are you grateful for?
For me, it's grace. I'm just in a place where I just was in a Connect group a couple weeks ago, and the question was if you could ask Jesus one question. You're standing face to face with him, and the question I had was, how could you love me so much? You know, and just you live long enough, you realize that there's nothing about me that is special. I've messed up way too many times to deserve any of the things that I have in my life, let alone his grace and mercy.
I resonate so deeply with that, Steve. You know, I always tell people, you know, the gospel becomes real to you when you've just lived long enough to realize how incapable you are of fixing what's wrong with you.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
like you try, you spend a lot of time trying to fill that hole in your own soul. And then you realize only Jesus, only Jesus. That's powerful, man. All right, let's stay there. One misconception people have about your generation, Gen X. We are the best generation. Just so you guys know,
Okay.
We'll see.
we are the best generation. So, what's one misconception people
History will
have?
tell.
They think we're boomers.
It's the white beard for me, right? Yeah.
Just think we don't understand.
Yeah. We've moved into that phase, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, where the slang, I don't understand the slang anymore, you know.
I just think the perception by younger generations is we don't get it.
Yeah.
They know better.
Yeah.
And I was there.
Yeah.
I felt the same thing with my parents' and grandparents' generation. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Happens. So, yeah.
So I'm technically a millennial, but I don't relate with millennials, I guess, because I got married when I was 20. My wife was 19. We started our business 2019. We then had kids when 3 years later. We bought a house and own our house. And so for millennials, a lot of millennials, from what I've seen in studies, is that there's a delayed adolescence. People wait to get married, wait to have kids. Then now they've waited too long to buy a house. Whereas we've kind of did all those things really early. So I've always related with the next generation above me. And I think that those things of yeah, so I don't know. So maybe I'm more of a gen I don't know. Yeah. So I don't relate too much with millennials. I don't know what the misconception is on us, but yeah.
Yeah. See, the misconception that they've got about our generation is that we're not the most awesome.
right.
Yeah. There you go.
We are the most awesome.
But he gets it. He's a Gen X trapped in a
Exactly.
millennial
Yeah.
body.
Exactly.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
Trent, talk to us.
Oh man, I think for my generation, I think other generations think we are willing to take shortcuts to get to outcomes or be lazy. And I would say behind that is I think my generation takes a very different approach to things nowadays. And I think that approach is seen as bad, but I think it's different.
I actually like that. And we do really, we joke, but we do want to learn from you.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Teach you guys some stuff.
All right, that's it. All right, last question, last lightning round question. What's one phrase you're tired of hearing at work or at church?
Just use AI. Honestly, I've learned there's certain things that I use AI for that I think is practical and is helpful, but then I think there's things that we are letting AI do that I think we were made to do, and so we're going to lose certain just aspects of what it means to be human and what it means to work by just always having AI do the things for us.
There's an aspect of our image-bearing quality
Yes.
that can't be replicated
Yes.
by a machine. It just can't. Yeah, I agree with that. Trent, what do you think?
All the time, the phrase I hear in the marketplace is, let's get aligned. Let's get aligned on this. Let's connect and get aligned. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good intent, but it's too much. Let's get aligned on this. Yeah.
I like that. All right, we'll try to retire that. Yeah.
you.
Steve.
That's the way we've always done it.
Yeah. That's good.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and as Gen Xers, we hated when our boomer parents said that, right? You know, but well, guys, this has been incredibly rich. Thank you. You know, I think we want to, I don't know, we want to wrestle with these things and we want to do it together. You know, just this idea that work is sacred, that it was not intended for there to be a sacred secular divide, that whether we're putting our hands to closing loans, making films, and God bless you, accounting, right? real estate, renting apartments. Like it all matters to God. It is all part of his forming, filling, and subduing, and it can all be redeemed by the finished work of Jesus, because it was always intended to be part of God's work in the world. And so thank you for talking to us about that today, and we're grateful for all of you guys. So this is the official wrap for the inaugural meeting after the meeting.